Every summer since 2005, we have taken Motoryacht Venture to a different destination. Naturally, we have a general idea of where that might be, but when it comes to specifics, in the words of that venerable song from World War II,
we don't know where we're going until we're there,
which pretty well sums it up. As we depart the Fleming Service Centre at Delta Marine on Vancouver Island, it is impossible to know what adventures lie ahead. So the air on board is one of excitement and anticipation. This year we intend to remain in British Columbia and go no further north than Prince Rupert. We also plan to make a second, and longer, visit to the offshore islands of Haida Gwaii, previously known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. Our route takes us up the east coast of Vancouver Island. There is still snow on the mainland mountaintops. Timber resources line both sides of Discovery Passage and Johnson Strait. We stop at Lagoon Cove, one of the delightful family-run marinas catering for cruising yachts. Our next stop is North Island Marina at Port McNeill. We visit nearby Telegraph Cove. Here, a whale museum displays skeletons which allow us to grasp the size of the giants who inhabit these waters. North of Vancouver Island, the inside passage is open to the Pacific Ocean at Queen Charlotte Strait. The chart shows complicated bottom contours, resulting in shallows and submerged rocks. On a foggy day in 1792, Vancouver's ships, HMS Discovery and Chatham, ran aground here. We pass Cape Caution into the lee of Calvert Island, where calmer waters return. We anchor off the Hakai Institute, a scientific research centre engaged in carrying out long-term research into such subjects as to how climate change is affecting our ecosystems. This whole coast is vulnerable to tsunamis due to the Cascadia subduction zone, which runs offshore all the way from just north of Vancouver Island to Northern California. A well-maintained trail through the forest leads to one of the rare sandy beaches to be found in this part of the world. The next significant piece of land is Japan. Like every shoreline, this is encumbered with a tumbled tangle of bleached and battered logs. Logs and trees in the water are a fact of life when navigating these waters, and require constant vigilance that precludes travelling at speed or in the dark. Rain is to be expected, and can result in wonderful waterfalls, such as this one in Chatham Strait. We anchor for the night in Clue Nugget Marine Park. We arrive at our most northerly destination, Prince Rupert. Around 20 small cruise ships call here each season, each carrying between 500 and 1,000 passengers. Prince Rupert is an excellent place to refuel and reprovision, and also has a good range of restaurants. It is Canada's most northerly town on the west coast, located just south of the border with Alaska. Unlike towns north of here, Prince Rupert is connected to the rest of the continent by road and rail and has become an important shipping terminal. After refueling and provisioning, we take our leave of the mainland, heading for offshore islands. We spend one night anchored in Welcome Harbour on Porcher Island, the welcome being provided by a bald eagle. From here we make the 70-mile crossing of treacherous Hecate Strait to Sandspit on the islands of Haida Gwaii. We tie up at Sandspit Marina. It rains a lot here, and if you don't pay attention, the forest can begin to take over your boat. Haida Gwaii comprises two main islands, Graham in the north and Moresby in the south. The southern portion of Moresby is given over to a nature reserve called Gwaii Hanas. It is shown in dark green on this map. Anyone wishing to visit must attend a mandatory orientation at the Haida Heritage Centre at Skidegate on Graham Island, which means taking the ferry. The centre is also a museum.
It's transforming from the bird above it, the cormorant. Representing again our relationships. High-ranking women would get piercings at a very young age right here. As their status went up, it would get bigger and bigger. You'll see a few photos in the museum. So this is what the dogfish woman has in her lip, is a lorette, again with the slits on the side of her face.
We rent a car to drive all the surface roads, which are shown here in red. Rental vehicles are not permitted on logging roads, of which there are many, as shown by the dotted lines on this map of Graham Island, where logging continues apace, but is forbidden in Gwaii Hanas on Moresby Island. We drive to the top of Graham Island, passing Balance Rock. We visit the hamlets of Masset and Old Masset and continue to the end of the road leading to Rose Spit. Seen here in the distance, beyond the expanse of sand revealed at low tide. Tidal range in Haida Gwaii can be as much as 24 feet, so you need to pay attention. The two main islands of Graham and Moresby are divided by Skidegate Narrows. The tidal range on the eastern entrance is almost double that on the west. No authority seems to have an accurate handle on the behavior of the tides in the Narrows. This photo shows the entrance as seen from the east. We arranged to follow a sailboat who has taken the precaution of first navigating the channel at low tide in a small tender equipped with a depth sounder and a plotter. The channel is now well defined by day markers. Westbound, the green square top markers are left to port and red triangles to starboard. Initially, the current is behind us, as can be seen here. The depth sounder shows less than 8 feet.
Looks like we have some range markers down there.
Here we are approaching the narrowest section. Range markers are 2 marks which, when lined up, indicate that you are on the correct course. We meet other small craft. Now the current has reversed and turned against us. There is much less drama at the Western Narrows, where kelp is the major hazard. We have now reached the west coast with its intimidating reputation. We decide to circumnavigate Marble Island. The seas are boisterous, but nothing compared to their reputation. Basalt columns form cliffs in Tanu Bay on Graham Island. We spend the night in our Motoryacht channel on Moresby Island before returning to Queen Charlotte through the Narrows. Back in Queen Charlotte, the tide is low, and the angle of the marina ramp is intimidating. The tidal range is 17 feet. Float planes come and go. The weather is misty, but the following morning opens with a rainbow wash of the surrounding hills. After reprovisioning, we set off on our planned cruise down the east coast. do not stop at the village watchman sites where we called during our previous visit. For the first couple of days, we have not yet reached the boundaries of the park. Evidence of logging remains. The hillsides are scarred with landslides. In Crescent Inlet we come across a sunfish. It is hard to see details, but these strange fish vary in size from 550 to 2,200 pounds. In the grass at the head of the bay, we see as many as 6 deer and 6 black bears grazing alongside each other. Sadly for us, they are too far away to photograph. In La Sac Inlet, a very vocal seal loudly and persistently objects to our presence. Continuing south, we anchor in Bag Harbour and make a couple of tender expeditions into Dolomite Channel, also known as Burnaby Narrows. Unfortunately, it does not live up to its billing of being a cornucopia of sea life. Instead, we find it to be more of a graveyard of clams, apparently overwhelmed by moon snails, which have the nasty ability to drill holes in clam shells and suck out the unfortunate inhabitants. We see no sea stars, but mainly kelp and jellyfish, moving in the swift current. Taking advantage of calm weather, we move into Hecate Strait, where we pass many stellar sea lions hauled out on joist rocks. We stay well away, as they are very skittish and their populations have crashed in recent years. The charter schooner, Passing Cloud, looks magnificent. Given our luck with the weather, we decide to alter our plans and continue on to the rarely visited Terroir Islands, at the extreme tip of Haida Gwaii. Few people get to come here. These remote rocks are inhabited by sea lions, puffins and seabirds, plus the bald eagles who prey on them. Strong currents flow between the islands. Returning to the more sheltered waters of Kungit Island, 2 rusted boilers are all that remain of an abandoned whaling station at Rhodes Harbour. It is the only privately owned property within the confines of Gwaihanas Park. We proceed next to SGang Gwaay, previously known as Ninstitz, on Anthony Island. We anchor off in Gray's Cove and contact the watchman by VHF. We go ashore by tender. This was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1981. We are met and given a tour of the remains of the village site by a personable young Haida woman. The main surviving features are totems of a type described as mortuary poles. Some were removed many years ago to preserve them, but in the Haida culture, such poles are left to decay naturally. The Haida people have inhabited these islands for at least 12,500 years. At the time of colonial contact, the population of Haida Gwaii was roughly 30,000. During the 1800s, it is estimated that 90% of the population died from smallpox alone. By 1900, only 350 people remained. Survivors gathered here in this remote spot. During the previous winter of 2018, violent winds caused a massive blowdown of mature trees near the landing site. Here we can see a tree whose roots have been peeled off bare rock with virtually no soil beneath them. Again, taking advantage of the continuing spell of rare, calm weather, we decide to proceed up the notorious west coast. The Douglas cruising guide has some ominous advice. This entire distance is unsurveyed. Vessels that venture into this uninhabited and remote area must be able to rely on their own observations and resources, where risk to vessel and life can become extreme. After a bumpy passage, we pass through Tassoo Narrows into extensive Tassoo Sound and proceed to its innermost anchorage of Botany Inlet. We pass by Hunger Harbour, where the remains of a huge mining operation scar the mountainside. The mine was operated between 1918 and the 1960s. In the grassy area at the head of Botany Inlet, we spot a pair of sandhill cranes, several Sitka deer, including a doe with a nursing fawn, and several bears, all grazing peacefully together. The next day we head once more into the open Pacific through Tassoo Narrows. It is foggy. The windswept trees clearly show the direction of the prevailing winds. Even though there is little wind, the seas are lumpy and uncomfortable due to current against tide. We decide against continuing north over the top of Chatham Island and head for Englefield Bay. We anchor in Thetis Anchorage at the head of Mitchell Inlet, mindful of the depth and the tide. Even so, it is a surprise in the morning to see the proximity of dry land, even though we are still afloat in 34 feet of water. A Sitka black-tailed deer sets off on a shortcut, but reverses course when he sees us in the way. The lumpy seas reinforce our decision to return to Queen Charlotte through Skidegate Narrows. As we make our third transit of the channel, we do not wait for slack tide and encounter strong currents, which are no problem for Venture with her reserve power. We even see a bear grazing along the shore. We are now back in familiar territory, having completed our circumnavigation of Moresby Island and seen much of Haida Gwaii. It is time for us to return to mainland British Columbia, which will be covered in Part 2.